Sometimes I wonder, so it's nice to ask, why do we come here on Sunday mornings? What draws us here? The topic for today is where borders are irrelevant. And so I asked Julian this morning, I said, well, what would you say where borders are irrelevant? And, kids pick up on things that, he immediately got into the where. And I didn't think about the where. And he's like, where? Well, it would be wherever God's practiced. I'm like, yeah. And that's why we come here, I think, that we have a life so full of borders. And it's wonderful to come together where we're consciously recognizing that beyond all these borders, there's only one power and one presence. And so we all know that everyone in this room has a unique path, that none of our paths have been the same. But we know one thing, that underneath all of our paths, there's one power, one presence, one life. And we have many different names for it. But those are just names. Names are just labels. But the thing itself is the same. I love that the topic for this title, this week, where borders are irrelevant, just came to me. We had done a 2-hour meditation a couple weeks ago, and it just came. And then this week, I read out these 6 different books in the morning, like 1 or 2 pages in each book, and it was amazing to me. Every single book, which were different world's traditions, were saying the exact same thing, that the people who are really awake are the ones who are seeing that beyond all appearances, there's only one life and one power and one presence. That is our work. That's the theme for the month is it's a whole new world. And the whole new world is where we see behind plants, we see behind minerals and rocks and oceans and trees and weather. We see behind animals, every type of animal, whether they be insects or elephants. We see behind all people, what culture, race, nation, behind everything, behind all the stars and the galaxies and the black holes, behind all of it is this one power and one presence. When we start to really consciously practice that as much as we possibly can throughout our daily life, not just conceptually, but practice living from that place of seeing beyond all appearances, we start tapping into this whole new world, this place where borders are irrelevant. And yet we recognize that we also live in a human world. So as Teilhard de Chardin said, he's the original sayer of we're spiritual beings having a human experience. So we're constantly having a simultaneous experience that we can be in this new world where borders are irrelevant, but then at the same time we're operating in a human world where a lot of people are not yet awake to that awareness. And because they're not awake to that awareness, and sometimes there's the unconscious, not sometimes, a lot of the times, well, I'll just speak for myself. In me, there's a lot of ignorance still. There's still part of me, I'm not fully enlightened. I as much as I'd love to say I'm fully enlightened, got about 1,000 years left for that. So though there's ignorant parts inside of myself as well. So as within, so without. So we have these horrible ignorant pockets of ignorance on our planet. And so healthy boundaries are needed. So if there's someone who is unhealthy for us to be around, we don't just say, well, it's all God and you're welcome into my life. No, we put up a healthy boundary. I know the power and the presence and the love of God is within you, and I recognize that you're not fully awake to that in this moment or always. It doesn't, or not always, but in this, for a lot of time, a lot of decades, you seem to be ignorant of that. So I have boundaries up, and we can do it with our hearts open. That's what we have to remember, that when we come with the awareness that there's one power, one presence, I can put up a healthy boundary but still have my heart open. The border is when I close my heart, when I say there's separation here. So the interesting part of this journey of where borders are irrelevant, excuse me, and becoming this whole new world is to look in ourselves and say, where do we have these borders? Not the healthy boundaries. And there's also, by the way, I want to say there's other healthy boundaries. I think it's important just to acknowledge it. It's not just with unhealthy people. That the more open we become, there's a whole beautiful world out there, but we don't have time for the whole beautiful world. That we actually have to have borders of time and space. So I don't know why I think the first person I heard say this was the opera singer Beverly Sills, and why I would have heard her say this, I don't know. So I question why I say that, but I've heard other people say it too, which is as they've gotten older, they get more strict about who they let into their life. not because the other people are wrong or bad or unhealthy, but we realize we have a limited amount of time. And it's almost like we learn to become parents to ourselves. And I want to nurture my own spiritual growth. I want to nurture my own life. And so I'm going to really spend time with the people who are going to help support me in that spiritual growth, who are going to be part of that in terms of who I want to spend my time with. So there's all sorts of boundaries that are healthy and not necessarily against anybody, but just to help us develop. So those are all on the human realm, and those are all valuable. But as we begin to grow and evolve, we also see that we also are vibrating with oneness. So people will come into our life that we may not know are gifts, but they turn out to be incredible gifts. Even someone we just meet passing have a quick conversation with at a coffee shop, which I happen to go to pretty much every day. So I get a lot of those. So where borders are irrelevant, we as we grow, we'll see that those borders get wider and wider. And so humanly, we still want to, and how we deal with time and space, we have healthy boundaries. But spiritually, where borders are irrelevant are always spiritually. So we have this development of egocentric, ethnocentric, and world-centric. And the more we develop, the egocentric, the borders are really small and tight. I only really want people that are going to support me. It's all about me. And then ethnocentric is about my group. And this is where we get into trouble with any group identity. So there's a lot of talk now about different religions being bad and some being good. It's not the religion. That's why I love that Houston Smith book, The World's Religions. The ideal of every religion is stunningly beautiful. It's what people do with it. And if you're at an ethnocentric worldview or an egocentric worldview, you're going to say, my group is better than your group, and that border is very strong. There's a very solid sense of me and them, and we have to keep separate these two worlds. But then we continue to evolve into world-centric. And that wall, that border, has completely opened up. And we say, no, you know what? I can have my own way of being, and you can have your own way of being, and there doesn't need to be a border. And that's where I think most people in this room, I'm assuming, I'd even go so far as to say all of us, would not be here if we didn't have that sort of world-centric view, that everybody's view, everyone's perspective is valuable and important. And they might be different views, they might be different cultures, but we now don't have a border of us versus them. And that's the beginning place. And then what we find is that the more we travel to other countries, the more we experience other religions, actually go to experience them, that even those walls fall even more. And I say that because, again, when we're talking about it's a whole new world and where these borders are irrelevant, we have to start paying attention in our own journey. And I'm asking all of you to do this throughout the whole month, but also this week especially, is where are my borders? Where, not like I'm putting healthy borders up, but where are my borders? Where do I perceive other? And I think the important part of this question is to be honest with ourselves, because I think often we think things, but we're not quite as far as we think we are. I had that experience. I loved World Religions. Read that book many years ago, World Religions. I took East Asian religion class. Loved going to this East Asian bookstore. And I was learning all about Asian religions. But I had a personal connection with Jesus. And I didn't see any conflict. There was no problem with that. I love learning the religions, and I loved my relationship with Jesus. But as many of you know, my call to ministry came through Paramahansa Yogananda and Shunryu Suzuki. Again, I didn't have trouble with the religion, already studied Hinduism. But as I started to study with Yogananda, doing his home study lessons, going to the meditations, what I started to feel was he was infringing on my intimate relationship with Jesus. And what I noticed was that my mind, the border had come down, but I had a border in my heart, and I didn't even know it. And it actually took me a long time to even admit it, that I had a border of, I can only go so far with Yogananda, but he's not Jesus. And then the same thing happened with Shunryu Suzuki, that we have sometimes borders where our minds can, and it can happen, sometimes we feel more emotionally open, but our minds still are not completely open. We have these borders that sometimes we might not catch on to really quickly, of other. I'll let you in, but only a certain amount, because this is who I really am. And if I open my heart to that, then I might lose a little bit of who I really am, because that intimacy was who I really am. And connecting and having a deep, intimate spiritual connection with Yogananda, it wasn't just about an idea, it was impacting about who I really was, who I was about. And it was an expansion, it was a wall that had to fall for me. And didn't happen overnight. It wasn't me just acknowledging it. I had to actually do deep work on that, to let that wall, that border fall. And so we have these borders within us. So I use that as an example, but sometimes it's ideas that are our borders. We have a border of this is the right way to see something and this is the wrong way, and we do this a lot. I remember I was at Agape at the time, and Seasons for Nonviolence had just started. It was a big movement that was happening. They actually went to the UN and got a bunch of communities around the country were practicing Season for Nonviolence, communicating from nonviolence. It's the 64-day period between when Gandhi lost his life to when Martin Luther King lost his life. And Reverend Michael very much was passionate with Martin Luther King and Reverend Nirvana. So they were just passionate. Never use violence. Just always be in peace. Don't respond to anything in a violent way. We just discovered email. This was in the late 90s. It was very exciting. My family, for the first time, was like actually talking more than once a few months because we had email. This was like so fun. But my family doesn't talk about normal things. We talk about, well, not me. I just follow them, and they are like into what's happening in Bosnia. And no, I'm just kidding. They're really into what's happening in the world news. So and I just remember it was just this moment where I was on email with my brother. There's Reverend Nirvana just passionately saying, you never use violence. My brother's saying, you're crazy. If he was living in Japan at the time, and I don't know if Bosnia just happened or was happening at the same time, but it was very much on the consciousness of my family. But horrible things were happening there, just very violent, cruel stuff. And he said, I'm sorry, if my family, if my children, my little daughter's there, and someone's going to come hurt her, I'm going to use violence. You are going to stay away from my child. And Nirvana said, no, not even in that case. You have to stand for peace. And my mind, see, I'm going to the ideas, borders. My mind's going, which is the right answer? What do I do? Do I go violence? And then I remember actually, I don't know what's popped my head. So I remember when I was in Boston, just another quick side story. My brother said, because I would come home at 1 o'clock at night because I was working in theaters, and he said, you have to be careful. Someone might attack you. And in that case, you have to hold a key in between your 2 fingers. And if they attack you, you poke them in the eye. So I remember just being in this constant debate the whole way home. I'd hold my key and I'd be looking around and I'm like, would I actually poke someone in their eye? That just seems so, maybe I just would prefer to be attacked. I don't know. And I'd be in this whole debate the whole time. Fortunately, I never was asked to actually make a decision because that was really baffling, but it was amazing. But our mind does that. What's the right answer? I got to have the right answer. And that's the border. Where's the border on this? And that's when I was also shifting from Yogananda to Shunryu Suzuki, and Shunryu Suzuki is all about paradox. And it was finally when he said, you can hold both ideas, total nonviolence, and there's time to protect, and don't have to grasp onto an idea. And that's when I was realizing that I was trying to grasp onto an idea, a concept that had a border. And I didn't need to have the border. That was just a human idea that I needed to have a border, that there's a right answer and a wrong answer, and I was trying to come up with the right answer. There is no the right answer. And so we start to free up our mind. So it's the borders. Where are the borders in my heart? Where are the borders in my mind? Where do I say there's a wall? I got to tell you another, I don't know, these funny things are coming to me. So, it's a Zen Cohen that I was just listening to Reverend Michael teach, and it just made me laugh. So, do you know what a Zen Cohen is? It's like a riddle that they give in Zen, and it's a riddle that the human mind cannot just rationally come to the answer. So, our human minds can only go so far, and then eventually we have to move into another state of being. So, one of their Zen Cohens is, oh, what was it? Do you remember? I played it with you. What was it? Do you remember? I played it for you. Oh, man. That's a really good one, too. But I guess I wasn't supposed to tell you today. Yeah, I told it to Julian. It was very funny. Think of something you would build in a bottle and it can't come out. You know, like a ship. So you build a ship and you put it. So imagine that you put this sailboat in the bottle, and then you have to get it out. How do you get it out? And you can't break the bottle. And so, of course, your mind can't figure out how to do it. And then you spend years on meditating on this. And then the answer is, I said, imagine the ship is in the bottle. The ship was never in the bottle. I just said, imagine it. Stop imagining it. And that's what our mind does. Our mind creates all these constructs, but it's imagining. Imagine something different. Isn't that great? And I just this past week, I'm just going to share this because of something I just learned 2 days ago. The power of how much we get involved in mind and thoughts that sometimes don't even impact reality, that we can be cruel about. There's a guy named St. Maximus the Confessor. Anyone ever heard of him? Yeah, I hadn't either until 2 days ago. He got his hand chopped off, his tongue pulled out, and eventually died. Why? I mean, that's pretty serious. And it wasn't because it was done by the Roman, this is an early monk, and it wasn't because he was a Christian and these were done by the Roman Empire. He was killed by other Christians. Why? Because this was after the Nicene Council, and they had decided that Jesus was human and divine, had human and divine nature, but only divine will, that he couldn't have two wills. He was only divine. And St. Maximus said, no, Jesus had two natures, human and divine, but also had two wills, human will and divine will, and he made free choice to move into divine will, and that's why he was such a powerful example, because he showed us the way of how to give our human will over to divine will. And for that one idea, his hand was chopped off and his tongue pulled out. That's how powerful ideas and borders around ideas can have, these walls. So normally we don't see such dramatic impacts with ideas, but the idea is that if we want a whole new world, we have to start finding the borders and healing within ourselves. Where are the borders in my mind, and especially in my thoughts? Because when I start looking at this, as I've been with this, I find all sorts of borders that I don't even know that was there. And that's where our healing is. And I love this quote. What does it look like? What's this whole new world look like? And I'm sure many of you have heard this quote before because it's pretty famous, but I'm going to read it anyway. It's by Rumi. Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. When the soul lies down in the grass, the world is so full to talk about. Ideas, language, even the phrase each other doesn't make any sense. That's what the field beyond these conceptual ideas, these walls, these borders that we have starts to feel like. And how does that happen? That happens inside of us. We're the entire cosmos. There's a lot of talk about communities now being the enlightened ones. I hear this more in the Buddhist communities. They call it Sangha, spiritual community. And that rather than there being one enlightened person like there's been in the past, like these spiritual masters, that what that looks like today is spiritual communities, enlightened spiritual communities. And I believe that. I think there is a place for enlightened spiritual communities, but even enlightened spiritual communities come from enlightened individuals. And for me, that's the intention of this place called the Lighthouse, is to consciously support ourselves individually and collectively to become a whole new world, to become a place where we can be safe in this space, to have no borders, where we can just be open and available and allow healing, whatever healing needs to happen, that this is a place where that can happen. That we don't have to be perfect here. We don't have to show up and never do anything wrong. We make mistakes all the time. We sometimes say hurtful things. Sometimes we do hurtful things, but we still are responded to in love, where there's no borders in that. We say, we still see who you are, still see who I am. There's only love. There's this wonderful, I just saw this picture this morning of a picture of our solar system and an atom, and they're exactly the same. If every one of the atoms in our body is a solar system, then the billions and billions of stars and galaxies are in our body. The entire holographic universe is our self. Brother Lawrence, his practice was to practice that the only beings in the world were just him and God. It wasn't him, God, and everybody else. It was just him and God, and everything was him and God. He was relating to God all the time. That's what we're here to do, is we are to be so consumed and to doing our work, to finding the truth of who we are. Now, in the mystery schools, what I just said, that to know that who we are, to know there's only one power and one presence, that there are no borders, whatever borders there are, like someone like Jesus, what I recognized, the healing for me was that it wasn't that Jesus and Buddha, Paramahansa and Shonin Suzuki actually were friends on the other side. That was like a young way of looking at it. But what I finally got was that Jesus was Yogananda, was Shunryu Suzuki. Shunryu Suzuki was Yogananda. That this whole idea that they were separate individuals is an illusion. They are one. They are one. They're not all these different individuals. There's only one, and that's true of us. There's only one. And the more we know this for ourselves, the more we become that vibrational frequency around us. Now, in the mystery schools, we couldn't teach that. You couldn't teach that out loud. And the reason why was because they thought there was a danger that if you learn the concept before you learn to embody it, that there was a disconnect and you'd actually stop working, because it's easy to say. The hard work, the long work, is doing the work every day. And that's why community is important. And it's a community over the long haul. Because this isn't something that happens in a year. You know, I moved across country. I consciously started the spiritual. We've all been it our whole life. But where I said, this is what's most important to me. My whole life is dedicated to this. 1990 is the first time I moved across country. It's been 27 years, and it amazes me how much I've grown in that 27 years. And it's humbling. I think why you get more humble as you go is because then you realize how much further you have to go. And so this isn't a journey that happens overnight. And we need support. We need other people, because that vibrational frequency gets pulled down all the time. And that's why we come to the community. Now, so in these mystery schools, you had to go through the different levels. And you weren't allowed to learn the level above you until you've embodied, not just talked about, but embodied that certain stage of development. Then you would go through an initiation to the next level. And the highest level was always death, the top of the pyramid. That was like a coffin and you die. And there's beauty in that. Reverend Michael talks about his experience of awakening where he was stabbed in the heart, and he had what we love this whole idea of quantum leap. He had a quantum leap into an enlightenment. And it's an extraordinary story when he tells it, but very moving, because you realize it was not easy. We think that quantum leap, just move into this. He moved into a whole other state of consciousness. Everything was love, beauty, but it completely whacked him out at the same time, because it was so expansive, and the rest of them hadn't caught up. So we can talk about, we can do it faster. You can't skip steps. So even if you move to this new state of consciousness really fast, the rest of you has to catch up, or it's not integrated. And he talks about that long journey of integration. And that's what we're all on, that even if you have a quantum leap in consciousness, it still takes time. This is a journey of patience. And today, as I was just being with the talk, and I'm going to end in a minute, I was really thinking about the song that we sing every Sunday at the end of the service, I walk my talk and talk my walk. It is easy to talk about spiritual principles. We're not a Toastmasters club. Anyone can get up and speak about truth, right? Motivational speakers. You can learn all sorts of ways to give clever talks and be entertaining and tell funny stories and have PowerPoints and do really cool things that engage us. But for me, that's not the highest ideal of this community. That's why I spend a lot of time talking about classes and seeing how we can get more classes going, because for me, it's about walking our talk, not just talking it, but walking it. And the more we walk our talk, then when we talk our talk, it is our walk, right? And that's where the power is, and that's what I believe this community is about. And so it's not something that happens overnight. Sometimes it's not always isn't this so exciting, because it's hard. But it's that daily process, and I want to give thanks to each and every one of you for being part of that process and for joining me in that process of this journey of walking the talk, of learning to walk the talk, because we are committed to It's a Whole New World. I lied. I have one more point. One of the things my parents never gave me the luxury of was to shut my eyes to what's happening in the world. So my mother would drive me to downtown Cleveland and show me how people lived who had a very different life. I had a very nice life growing up. I love my life now. My dad would always read to me about stories like Bosnia, the horrors that were happening. So even though I had a really nice life, he was saying, there's a whole world out there that's in pain. And you need to be conscious of that. You don't get to have the luxury of pretending that doesn't exist. For me, the spiritual awakening is not a selfish thing. It's the most giving and generous thing that we can do. If we think about the people who are suffering on this planet, we want to continue to help them at the level that's needed, but we have to wake up. We have to bring to our spiritual practice, our spiritual life every day, that it is essential that this world is crying for us to wake up, that there has to become an intensity to our spiritual life that is more important, not because it's selfish, not because I just want to get off work and go meditate, but because it's essential seems like not enough of a word. It's like life itself. This is why we are here, is to wake up. We have to be doing it. So to carry within us, when I'm saying, let's look at our borders, let's look where we have separation, let's heal, let's become this whole new world. It's not just some nice little thing. It's like the most important thing we have to be doing every single day. And to carry that intensity, because there's a lot of people in pain on this planet who need us to be doing this work. People need you to be meditating. People need you to wake up to the absolute magnificent truth of who you are. They're counting on it because they're not there. They don't have a world that supports them in knowing who they are. They don't have the support that we have. We have this. How grateful are we that we have this in each other, in our classes, in our own spiritual work, in the books that we have, and the friends that we have, and the family that we have. Let's use it to wake up. It is a calling, a divine calling for every single one of us. It's a whole new world because we are committed to being that whole new world today and always. Let's pray. And we enter into that place where there is no borders, where borders are irrelevant. There's no me and you. There's no one person praying and one person listening. There's only the isness of the I am that I am. That is remembering in this moment and calling forth who it really is. This I am presence that is in, through, and as all creation. It is this earth, it is this galaxy, it is the galaxies upon galaxies upon galaxies, and the billions and billions of stars beyond anything we could ever humanly imagine. It is the baby who's calling itself forth, and the mother who is nurturing it. It is everything. There's nothing ever outside of this one. There's nothing that doesn't belong. There is nothing that doesn't fit. Every aspect of creation is part of and inherent and essential to this one life and this one power and this one presence. And how grateful I am to be in this consciousness here and now with every beautiful individuation of God, a beautiful expression of God in this room. We are one. There are no borders. There is no other. We are one. We are in this one love. We are in this one part. We know the children in the other room. We know all beings everywhere. One. And it is this oneness that is a source of all healing everywhere. Within us, physically, any healing that needs to happen, we go to source. Emotionally, we go to source. Financially, we go to source. Mentally, intellectually, thoughts, conceptions, we go to source. We let go of the borders. We let go of the separation. God is in, through, and as everything. everything. There's never anything inside of our life, about our life, that is separate from God. Our work life, our colleagues, our bosses, our employees, our clients, our family members, extended family members, our community members, our friends, people who drive on the freeway with us, every being of light in this nation, on this planet, one love. All the healing presence comes from this awareness. One. Healing happens when separation dissolves into the nothingness from which it came, until all borders are dissolved, until there's no need for any borders ever again. This is the new world in which we are here to live, move, and have our being, to embody, to walk our talk, and to talk our walk. For the beauty and the magnificence of God awakened and living and giving of itself as this community, I just say thank you. For the healing that is always present for every being on this planet, I say thank you. And I give a special call out to those beings on this planet who have no voice, who are invisible. We don't even know where they are or what's happening in their life, but they are not having enough to eat. They don't have enough food to drink or water to eat. They are being hurt by people close to them, family members or people in their world. We see you in the invisible. God sees all things, and even now we call forth for that healing to happen, for the God energy to be awoke everywhere on this planet, in, through, and as our own consciousness. We are one with everything on this planet. We awaken, we call forth the love, the unconditional love within ourselves, and we demand it to come forth and to be cultivated in every area of this planet. We are committed to this new world for everybody, a world that works for everyone. This whole new world, it is now, as each and every one here, and I say thank you, Mother, Father, God, for the infinite power and presence of the consciousness that is in this room right in this moment. It is palpable. In a deep and abiding gratitude, I just let this word be. I completely set it free into the law of life, knowing that as it is spoken, it is done. And I invite us all to say together now, and so it is. Amen.
And so it is, and so it is, and so it is. Amen. 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 And so it is. Amen.
Amen and amen.